Do you ever feel like you just don't belong into a room? Like everyone else is so much smarter than you? Like you have nothing to contribute that is worth listening to? Kind of like you cheated your way in there because people seem to think that you are smarter than you actually are? I get that feeling a lot. Hello, imposter syndrome. The internet's most trustworthy source, Wikipedia, defines imposter syndrome as a psychological pattern of doubting your skills, talents, and accomplishments due to an internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And it doesn't matter if there's actual evidence of accomplishments, because people with imposter syndrome will attribute their success to luck or to having deceived others into thinking they are smarter than they perceive themselves to be. You can imagine imposter syndrome a bit like a bully in your head that keeps telling you that you're not good enough. I've always had imposter syndrome, but going to Cambridge definitely made it more extreme. Not due to anything that anyone else said or did, but rather because of the pressure I had built up in my own thoughts. Cambridge's reputation stands for academic excellence, and I felt like I was incapable of living up to the university's high standards. Any mark that isn't perfect is evidence of my imposterism in the eyes of my imposter syndrome. But when you constantly tell yourself that you're not good enough, you end up pretty miserable and eventually start believing it yourself. The thing about imposter syndrome is that actual evidence does not matter to the voice in your head. You get a perfect mark? Luck. You fail? Evidence of your incompetence. The imposter syndrome in me always finds a way to interpret the evidence in such a way that the cards are stacked against me. I've let my imposter syndrome govern my thoughts for a long time, and it's ended in me constantly feeling like a failure, regardless of my achievements. Anything I got, scholarships, good grades, etc., was just something else I got even though I didn't deserve it. And I wasn't confident in anything I did. I'd start my questions and supervisions with, I know this is probably a dumb question, and usually spoke at about 50% the volume of other students in the class. A professor called me out on it. She said that she wasn't going to count my contributions to class unless I give my answers confidently, loudly, and don't make my sentences sound like questions. She followed that up with, you know the answers, so say them like you know them, and not like you're guessing them. So I gave myself some fake confidence in order to get participation points for her class, and to my surprise, I usually gave the right answers. After a while, that fake confidence became more and more real. I started speaking up in other classes and no longer started my questions with, I know this might be a dumb question. So what about my imposter syndrome during this time? Our relationship had changed. The thing that changed is that I now talk back. It's become a bit like a bet between me and my imposter syndrome. When my mind tells me that I'm not good enough, that I'll never pass, never get that scholarship, never graduate, etc., I tell myself that I'll prove that statement wrong. And then I work towards that. My imposter syndrome still tries to tell me that my grades and anything else is merely luck, but you are only so likely to get lucky. When I got a perfect mark on my first exam at my exchange university, I shared it on my socials, and lots of people told me how that mark is super rare in German law schools. My imposter syndrome immediately sprang into action. Well, you see, this must have been a mistake. It's probably a typo. There's no way you got that mark. But when I got the same mark in my second exam, I was like, well, what's the statistical likelihood of that mistake happening twice? My imposter syndrome still tries to turn the tables, and to be honest, there are days where I believe in my rational arguments, and there are other days where my imposter syndrome is on a winning streak. But most of the time, I'm on a mission to prove my imposter syndrome wrong. That mean voice in your head can easily attribute one good mark to luck. But if you keep working hard and keep achieving stuff, you're making it less and less likely that it is all just due to luck. In a weird way, my imposter syndrome has become my motivation to work harder because I want to prove it wrong.